excited that he had dropped to 30. And then the second round, similar thing with Anton. I think that, those guys both are winning players. They've played in a lot of big moments and a lot of big games and big environments. They know how to play on both ends of the floor. They've been really well coached. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you just at these picks, and when you're not picking in the top 5 of the draft, you're probably not weighing that stuff quite as strongly, right? You're looking for best fit, best player who can come in and accentuate your team, and who can grow within your group. And they're both young enough they can do that too.
Brad, you guys also released Kristaps had his surgery today with a pretty lengthy recovery timeline. What else can you tell us about his situation, and how does that timeline impact at all what your priorities entering free agency here?
Yeah, I mean, surgery went great. I think the way that it impacts us is just making sure we have the right amount of bodies for the start of the season. But obviously he'll be back, at some point soon into the season, and we'll go from there. But our guys did a really good job of playing without him this year, and figuring out the best way to navigate those times. But there's no question we're better when he's on the floor. And so, get him back, get him fully healthy, and get him ready to go, and let him do his little WWE entrance in the Garden whenever that time comes, and maybe we'll need a jolt in December or whenever that is, and that'll be a good little evening.
Hey, Brad, Baylor was telling us this morning how he was here a couple years ago for a workout. Just what has stood out to you about his growth over the last couple of years?
Well, I think he's done a good job of with his body. He has done a good job in the weight room. He's always been super skilled, super smart, and super tough. Like he's a basketball player now. Like he knows how to play. And so I think that, getting his body to the level it's been in the last couple years, and the way that that's translated into his performances in the Big East is not a surprise, because he's got a lot of good things going for him.
Brad, on Kristaps, his absence, obviously you had a number of guys depth-wise that really filled in well for him throughout this year, and even the playoffs. Some of those guys are free agents. How big of a priority is kind of that continuity at that position, given what the success those guys had last year?
Yeah, I mean, I can't. Everybody on our roster we loved having here, and we'll continue to work on filling out our roster for the upcoming season. But there's no doubt that we'll really value continuity in that.
And on the coaching staff, obviously a couple of guys leaving. Charles, Jeff leaves for LA. How do you kind of go about replacing that brain power? I know Joe talked a lot about kind of like internal ascension on that coaching staff, promotions, things like that. How do you kind of go about replacing guys who head out in terms of the coaching staff, or even what Jeff brought to the organization this year?
Well, I think, anytime you have success, you're going to usually lose a coach or two, and that's pretty typical. So, and we've been used to that here, which has been, we look at it as a real positive, because it's opportunities for them to go and move on and usually move up and do the things that they want to do and kind of achieve their dreams. And at the same time, it opens up opportunities to move up here. And if we've done a good job in the years that we have, then not only are people, getting older, they're also really growing within their roles, and we're able to promote from within, and that should be the priority first. And I think we've got a good group to be able to do that with. And we may have a hire or two from the outside that, more in the developmental roles. But we'll announce all that after that's all finalized, whenever that time comes. But I'm excited about staff. I mean, I think Joe and, entering year 3 with coaching in the last 2 playoffs is like dog years. So, he and his staff have a lot more experience than even their age would indicate.
Brad, back to the age question with Baylor and Anton. Last couple of years, the guys you brought in the draft were 19, 20 years old. How does it change things from a development track standpoint when you're bringing in guys who are now 23, 24?
Well, I think first of all, I think guys are playing longer. And so it's not like, 23 and 24 is still young in the big picture of things. I think that both of those guys have shown good growth throughout their careers, and so you would anticipate they would continue to grow. And then I think, you're kind of looking at best of both worlds from our standpoint because, JD will be a free agent, but, we'd very much like to try to figure out a way to get him back in some capacity. And he's 21. Jordan Walsh is 20. Jaden Springer's 21. So some of our, it's funny, a lot of our draft workouts were older than the guys that were leaving the gym when the draft workout guys came in the gym. So we have some young guys in there that we think really highly of. And I do think that it's good to have a balance of that. I don't know that, all those guys and two 19-year-olds, are probably ready for the long road like maybe this group will be with a couple more older college guys.
Hey, Brad, how are you?
Good.
That's kind of what I was going to ask also, but there was so much speculation on television that there was like a bias against 23-year-olds, like Kennett from Tennessee was one kid who slipped, and they kept saying it was because he's 23 years old. Can you talk about that a little bit? And also the other question I want to ask you was, so many European players in the first round, and the Olympics obviously are going to be so competitive. Just make an observation about that.
Yeah, basketball is a global game, and it's just continuing to expand. I think we all knew that in this particular draft, this was going to be a big draft for the international players. You kind of knew that right out of the gate. I think a lot of GMs, a lot of assistant GMs and scouts spent a lot of time in Europe this year, in Australia this year, and different places around the globe scouting. And I think that showed itself true. As far as the age thing, there's data on, the better bets are, as far as the highest upside are younger, right? But at the same time, each person's their own entity, and it's a long career ahead. So, again, we're not sitting in draft pick slots that are like, you get everything, right? So if you can find players that you think are really tough, really smart, about the right things, know the game, then you try to gobble them up, and make them a part of your program, and hopefully those guys can come in and accentuate our best players like we ask everybody else to.
Hey, Brad. First off, the decision for an option on Sam Hauser's team option for the contract is due on Saturday. Has a decision been made there? And could drafting Shireman have an impact on a potential extension with Hauser?
I would just say that I'm not going to get into the particulars of what decisions we'll make with each guy and their contracts, but I will say we want Hauser to be here for a long time.
And then secondly, with Charles going to Charlotte, you talked about the possibility of internal promotion. Do you know of any coaches? Can you comment on if he's bringing anyone from here with him to the Hornets?
I don't know what all is done contractually, so I'll just wait till we say who's on our staff next year, or he does with his staff.
Brad, a couple of days ago, I asked you about the importance of evaluating character in terms of chemistry when you're looking at team building. I was curious if there's anything you saw in Baylor and Anton specifically in terms of the off-the-court stuff, and how much of that went into the scouting and evaluation process.
Yeah, it's going to go into our scouting evaluation process on every guy that walks through the door, because you have to be a person that raises the energy level in the room. We can't be dragging each other down. There's enough going on. The opponents are hard enough, so that's a huge part of our whole process. And these two guys are winners, and we believe that. And they like basketball, they work hard, and they're smart. and they're tough, and you know, when they come here, they've got to continue to raise their level because our guys are too.
Brad, continuing on that, everyone always focuses on like kind of the stars buying in and raising the energy level. How important is it from your vantage point to make sure that's consistent for like every single person? And how could like somebody at the end of a bench not being bought in affect the team?
I think it's important for everybody that's in this building every day. You know, it's important for the trainers and the coaching staff and for the front office and everybody else to, we can't have any, you know, people, again, you know, bringing the energy down. We just can't. We can't have somebody moving in a different direction. We can't have it. And so, you know, as far as players go, I think that's the, you know, they've been great. You know, the biggest challenge in building a team year to year is getting guys comfortable in their roles, because they got to embrace them and they got to realize that they can improve and grow through whatever their role is. But at some point, you've got to give for the good of the team. And you know, the quicker you get to that point as a coaching staff with guys, the better that you can just focus on coaching basketball. And I think the reality is we all have to do that. You know, all of us have roles in this building to play, and we all have to embrace it as well as we can. And when people don't, or when you're not evaluating for that stuff, then it's hard. You know, it just, you know, it takes energy away from moving forward.
And then, you know, with the second apron now, there's like another threshold teams are kind of dancing with, trying to manage their cap, instead of it just being like, does a tax you want to go for? It's like, can a real contender deal with the second apron? How did you see teams kind of maneuver around that? How do you feel like that is sort of to impact the way everyone?
Yeah, I mean, you saw a couple moves today where people are, you know, either setting themselves up to sign the next contract or to do things that they can kind of dance around that second apron or to be just inside of it. I mean, obviously we're a little bit of, you know, we project to be a little bit above, and but we projected to be that last year when we made those trades, and we knew kind of what we were getting ourselves into. So we just have to all navigate it. We all know the basketball penalties that are associated with it, and there's, you know, we have to look at you know, how are we going to be able to navigate that world? You know, from a financial standpoint, from a basketball penalty standpoint, and all of those things. And then B, put the best roster together that you can, you know, to put your best foot forward. As I said the other day, like one of my main objectives is to not have this be, and it goes back 10 years, is not have this be anything but sustainable. Like, keep finding a way to be sustainable. Keep finding a way to sustainably put yourself in the mix for years and years and years. Doesn't mean we're not going to have a down year or a rough year, or you know, maybe we don't make the playoffs one year, but it's just not big dips. That's what we would like. It's hard to do because the other teams are good too.
Brad, in 13, the trade with the Nets got you basically Jason and Jalen. It reshaped the franchise. But it seems now the Knicks literally gave up 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. Like, the worth of the draft seems to be dwindling, or for some teams, like just the first-round picks are kind of be given away. And how have, with NIL and some of these guys coming from out of nowhere and some of them not working out, and how is the draft in terms of roster building impacted this franchise, and how has it changed over the last decade? Because it seems like it's just so much different.
Well, it's super important, though. You know, I think, you know, a lot of these teams, the Knicks included, stockpiled a bunch of picks that they had worked hard to get for a long time, and then, you know, each of these teams decides when they're going to cash those in, right? And they obviously have a great team, and so they felt like this was a really good time, and sure looks like they're going to be really, really good. And so that's just part of it. As far as I'm concerned, you know, obviously we haven't had much draft pick within the first round in the last couple of years, but when you look at our roster this year, you know, and you look at our top 8 guys, you know, Jason and Jalen were drafted here, Peyton was drafted here, and Sam Hauser was signed on draft night here. And so it's a critical component to building a team, you know, and you know, we've had good runs before this where we had even more that were drafted. So I just think we have to, it's a balance, right? but the draft is important, and if you get a chance to get a really good player, no matter what slot you're in, man, it can make a huge difference. And we're hopeful that these two guys come in with the right mindset, and I have no doubt that they'll have good careers, and we're looking forward to playing a part in that.
Brett, you guys are in a pretty great spot roster-wise going back for next season, but with that comes some pretty hefty, tax penalties with that payroll there. For going forward now, are you guys in a spot, are you impeded by that spending already when you're dealing with your own free agents right now or additional spending, or do you guys have still the green light from ownership to be able to even add to that now and going forward here?
Well, I mean, I think as far as like trying to extend our guys, and we talked about Sam earlier, and we'd love to have these guys that are extension eligible around here as long as we can. They're great. I mean, they're awesome, obviously. And as far as signing or adding to this year's payroll, there's really not much we can do, right? It's going to be basically minimum level contracts or those levels. And, even if we were to make a trade, we can't take more in, right? That's just the way the new rules work. So you kind of know where you're going to be for this year as currently constructed. And, yeah, we have the green light to do that. And, we're just going to try to be as good as we can be again.
Brad, last year you spoke to us at like 2 a.m, I think it was.
Yeah, this is way better. Let's move it all to 4. Let's do it all. Yeah, maybe Mike could work on having it in the morning in the first round, and then a little break in the afternoon, and then a little, late afternoon, early evening draft, and get it all done.
I'm sure the television partners would love a
Do you
mid-afternoon draft.
you think that would be a big hit? Yeah.
Oh, they didn't ask me about it.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, how did splitting this across 2 days change your process and your approach?
It did. We had a lot of talks about it. We had a lot of talks about, we have a really good second round pick in our coffers for next year, and we recognize that makes it a little different when you have it on a whole second day, kind of like the NFL has had. But we've had a lot of talks about what the right strategies are and everything else. But I will say this: it was nice to go home, at 11:30 last night and try to get a little sleep and get back here for today, then just cram it all in and end with a press conference at 2 a.m, which none of you wanted to be at either. Especially if we traded back 18 times and never picked a person. Although we did pick Jordan last year, so we had something good to talk about. But yeah, my son was texting me yesterday, I'm not staying up to see you trade back, am I? So I think that we all were, those late nights are no fun.
Just quickly with Anton, is the anticipation that he'll be on a 2-way deal?
Yeah, we'll get into all the contract stuff later, but I think with 17 to 18 spots, depending on how we did it. Last year we did 17 most of the year. We had 14 roster and 3 2-ways. Safe to say we're going to have some pretty good players on 2-ways. But I really like him. I think we didn't talk about him as much specifically. Talked more about Baylor, but Anton's strength and ability to move his feet laterally, give him a chance to be one of these big, strong hybrid forwards that can switch, guard a lot of people. I want him to come in here with the mindset that he's going to let it fly like he's never let it fly before, because I think he's a better shooter than he sometimes thinks he is. And so I'm looking forward to getting him in here in 8 days or so.